Today we'll be talking about George Orwell's masterpiece 1984. Before getting into the review, here's a brief synopsis. Published in 1949, 1984 is a dystopian novel set in a future where the world is divided into three constantly warring superstates. The story follows Winston Smith, a citizen of Oceania, a society ruled by an all powerful totalitarian regime led by a mysterious figure known as Big Brother. Winston works at the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to rewrite historical records so they always align with the party's ever changing narrative. While he appears obedient on the surface, Winston secretly despises the regime. He begins committing acts of rebellion, starting a forbidden diary, entering a secret relationship with a woman named Julia, and attempting to seek out a resistance movement known as the Brotherhood. In a world where constant surveillance is the norm, even these thoughts are considered crimes. The novel follows the consequences of Winston's quiet rebellion in the society where truth, memory, and individuality are tightly controlled, and where freedom itself is treated as a threat. One of the biggest reasons 1984 is considered a masterpiece is how brilliantly it explores propaganda and social conditioning. Orwell doesn't just tell you that the regime is evil, he shows you how power maintains itself. Big Brother's government controls people by rewriting history, falsifying facts, and using carefully engineered language to limit how people think. Language itself becomes a weapon. Through newspeak, the party removes words that allows rebellions to even be conceptualized. If people don't have the language to express dissent, dissent slowly ceases to exist. Any form of resistance, spoken, written, or even thought, is met with brutal punishment. Winston's character arc is deeply tragic. He begins as someone who hates the mindless obedience of the people around him, citizens who worship a tyrannical regime without question. He sees them as hollow, robotic, and broken. But by the end of the novel, after relentless torture and psychological conditioning, Winston himself becomes exactly what he once despised. The transformation is what makes 1984 so disturbing. Orwell presents brainwashing not as something dramatic or exaggerated, but as something methodical and systematic. Winston's arc show how the human psyche can be forcibly shaped, how fear, pain, and isolation can break even the strongest sense of identity. It's a chillingly realistic depiction of how individuals can be conditioned into submission, even into the supporting system that destroys them. The world building in 1984 is another standout element. Orwell creates a dystopian world that feels suffocating, bleak, and inescapable. Every aspect of society, from the thought police to the various ministries, exists solely to reinforce the party's control. The idea of constant surveillance is terrifying, not because of technology alone, but because of its psychological impact. People don't just fear being watched, they begin to police themselves. Relationships, friendships, love, trust become dangerous liabilities. Even facial expressions and tone of voice can be enough to mark someone as a traitor. What makes the system so effective is that it leaves no room for dissent. There's no safe space, no underground refuge, no true resistance. The regime doesn't just suppress rebellion, it anticipates it, absorbs it, and destroys it before it can grow. As a reader, you can genuinely feel the hopelessness of the world, and that emotional weight makes the story incredibly powerful. 1984 is a deeply compelling and disturbingly relevant novel, especially in today's world. It offers a stark and realistic portrayal of life under an authoritarian regime and exposes the mechanisms through which power controls people, not just physically but psychologically. George Orwell didn't just write a dystopian story, he wrote a warning. And decades later, that warning still feels uncomfortably close to reality.